All right, so hey everybody, welcome to VCTalk. Today I'm here with Philipp Emig. He's partner at Leitmotif VC. Thanks for taking the time to have this chat with me today. I'm very excited and to have this conversation. Let me give you a couple of words about VCTalk. For who don't know what VCTalk is, it's like a podcast for now, but in the future I'm planning to do other activities besides videos. It won't be only videos, where I have deeper conversation and I bring insight to people like you on from the VC ecosystem and deep tech and different industries. So yeah, that's a brief intro. And also, if you are a founder, look at the pinned comment under the video. I have something for you, so look into that. Thank Philip. Really appreciate you taking the time. Please introduce yourself, and it's great to have you.
Oh, sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Great that you're doing this with VC Talk. I hope that's growing into more than just a few interesting conversations, and I
Yeah,
hope this can be another puzzle piece for you. So again, Philip from my end, by now, as you said, a partner with Leitmotif out of our Munich office. I can share a little bit more about Leitmotif in a second, but probably how did I get there? So I started my career as a, let's say, trained finance and economics guy. Started in consulting, quite stereotypically, did a bit of a real world MBA, I would call it.
yeah,
So run from energy through automotive through other heavy industries as probably one of the common denominators. So I had this kind of strange appeal for the rather established companies that actually also make up, let's say, European industrial backbone.
yeah,
So was very tightly entrenched into these rather heavy industries and rather complex process industries. And I think the intersection that I kind of landed on was indeed between energy and automotive, and that's
yeah,
electrification and batteries. So kind of
yeah,
did quite a bit of work for one large German automotive OEM on that end, looked a lot up and down the supply chain, looked into how the business model is changing, looked into autonomous driving and how this would turn everything upside down. So
yeah,
really got soaked in by, let's say, the innovation side of industrials and the innovation side of energy. And at the same time, kind of stumbled more and more into what at McKinsey we called corporate startup interactions. So was
okay,
kind of fascinated by that idea of there is the innovation coming from the startup side and
yeah,
from like the entrepreneurial side. And on the other hand, the whole economy is carried or is executed through kind of industrial and manufacturing businesses.
yeah,
So I think with that in mind, I switched into VC and spent a total of a good 4 years with another fund in Munich called Picus Capital,
yeah,
and I was leading energy and climate over there. So kind of continued on my strange combination of energy and automotive, I would call it. Looked
yeah,
a lot into all sorts of electrification businesses. Batteries was again a big topic. And I think the other bit which I enjoyed a lot was building together with entrepreneurs, I would call it. So was in fact for three of our portfolio companies almost in an interims co-founder sort of role, lacking
hmm,
for a better word. So really dove deep into the romantic and the unromantic side of starting a company because there are obviously things that sound great and that do bring a lot of fun, but there
yeah,
are also like the unromantic sides to that. So I
yeah,
had the great pleasure to partner up with a couple of our portfolio entrepreneurs back then.
yeah,
And to close the loop, just recently joined Leitmotif, so back end of last year. And as I said, I'll be further on part of our Munich office. We are a Palo Alto and Munich split fund, which
yeah.
also kind
That's
of
cool. That's super cool.
which is really a cool setup in a sense of getting a bit of that on the one hand training, but exposure also into Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
And we will and we have historically deployed capital on both sides of the Atlantic,
yeah,
roughly split 60-40 between 60 for the US or North America and 30 to 40 for Europe. We
yeah,
do invest in, again, the areas that I kind of spent the majority of my career in so far. So we do look into energy predominantly. We do industrial and physical AI and robotics.
yeah,
This is, let's say, the second segment that we look into. And we sometimes call it we have a soft spot for deep tech. That means we
Yeah,
actually really
yeah,
like complex business models that have seemingly high kind of capital needs, but they are kind of tackling and addressing big needs. And for that
yeah,
reason, very, very excited to indeed look into topics that might have the potential to change the world.
yeah.
And last bit, I want
That's
to, yeah,
awesome. No,
sorry.
no.
And last
I
bit,
mean, that's awesome. That's awesome. Awesome stuff.
and last bit I want to say is we also try to kind of come in at this, let's say, early acceleration phase of companies. So our, I think, focus area that we put the most capital into is Series A and Series B. We
Yeah.
can go little bit earlier, we can go a little bit later, but I think we
I saw the Series C in Robco.
exactly. So that's a
It's like a
picture perfect
P.
company.
It's like a PE play or similar to PE or
I would not necessarily say PE. I think the Robco investment we underwrote, and we might come to that in a second as well, but we underwrote it from the perspective of there's still so much automation potential in, again, what we call like the industrial backbone, with a lot of that happening in Europe. And I
yeah.
think we were out of the Munich office quite excited about a German or European company running at this.
Yeah.
Side note, with also operations in the US. So kind of having made that transition already into the US, but still
Hmm.
having significant operations here. And we do still believe into kind of venture capital like returns in Robco.
Yeah.
Side note, I don't want to take false kind of reward for the Robco investment, who's kind of run by one of my colleagues.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
certainly want to give him all the credit, but I think we are quite excited to see how much potential there is still ahead for a company like them.
Hmm.
And once and again, our motto is a little bit bridging innovation that sometimes might even come from Silicon Valley or from the US side
Yeah.
with the EU industrial backbone. And I
Yeah.
think Orapco is yet and again another good example for that, where in this case, kind of European team is running at it with
Yeah.
global ambitions in one of the sectors where we see the most industrial automation potential
Hmm.
and the most robotics potential still. And I think if you look how they've been developing, they run quite a few kind of great programs already on running assembly lines. They have
Yeah.
a few really cool unannounced pilots out there, and I don't want to kind of spoil so much. I leave that to Roman
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
announce going forward. So there, I think many good things still to come for Robco, which is why we were so excited about the investment.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm not too much into that. I never did any type of deeper due diligence. Would be curious to see how it differentiates with ABB, for example. But let's not go too deep on that. Otherwise, we're gonna talk all the time about that. Very cool stuff. So, I wanted to have your perspective because I mean, in the past 5 years, has been crazy the amount of innovation that we experienced from AI. I mean, when ChatGPT came out, I was in San
Mhm.
Francisco, for example, and now it's coming out like quantum computing, robotics, even more, etc. Do you believe we are like at a turning point of human society? Like there are different phases of human, like
Mhm.
sapiens. And different phases. Do you think we are like a turning point of how we know like human society as a whole, or
Mhm. It's a very, very interesting question. And I think I might give you an answer that is very much inspired by our vision that we kind of pinned down over the last 2 weeks when I sat with the team in the US. And we were coming to it even from a more long-term perspective. And we were saying we believe by 2050 we might live in an age of abundance of probably energy. And
yeah,
again, you know me well enough to know that I kind of work every day to make energy abundance a reality.
yeah,
Probably also of labor. We touched on Robco. We might speak about humanoids also. So also the labor side might become much more readily available on an automation fashion.
yeah,
And I think again, you can't get around intelligence or compute. So we
yeah,
might go into this three-way combination of abundance of energy, labor, and intelligence and compute by, let's say, 2050. So
yeah,
the question is, how will the, let's say, period between 2025 and 20, say, 35 or 39, how will we at some point, or how will our kids look back at these years? And
yeah,
I think they are really the years where a lot of the groundwork has been, seeded, but also where we see the first inflections.
Yeah.
And if I go through these three aspects, I think on the one hand, if you look into energy, there is a lot of like at the moment seeding of new energy innovation. We
Yeah.
before we pressed record, we already went into fusion or also like nuclear fission and other energy technologies. And I
Yeah.
think at the moment we see a lot of groundbreaking innovation happening with a lot of capital being attracted by the promise of abundant energy. On the
Yeah.
other hand, like there's no week where there is no new announcement of record development on renewables, and this is to a good extent driven by China, for instance. But
Yeah.
also there, we have really hit an inflection point in terms of how the energy system is changing,
Hmm.
probably towards abundance. On
Yeah.
the robotics side, once and again, I think Robco is an example of industrial automation. We see the first really working humanoids in so far very hard to automate processes.
Hmm.
We at Leitmotif, we believe that manufacturing is going to be one that is significantly disrupted by robotics or aided by robotics in the next couple of years. But we also see that continuing in other kind of segments, be that energy and energy assembly, be that transportation. I said in Waymo a couple of days ago, right?
Yeah.
This is kind of if you believe in the core definition of a robot, that's also a robot application or a labor application that
Hmm.
might be transformative. And the last bit, I think that's the one where I can only add shallow additional knowledge to what is all out there. I think energy has become commonplace already, and the question is now only at what speed is that frontier continuing to move? How quickly are agents really taking over human jobs? How quickly are we able to move to AGI? So I
Yeah.
think all of that is making the current years, and I said this in a different context a couple of days ago, but very, very interesting and exceptional times to be an investor because you can witness a lot of that innovation on a
Yeah.
first-hand basis. But I think that's how we will, if we sit with a coffee at some point in whatever 50 years when we are retired, we might look back at these years and say, well, we did lay a lot of the groundwork and we saw a lot of the first inflections happening in the current years where once and again kind of great innovation and great entrepreneurs tap into these sectors to create a world by 2050 that might look very, very different from today. So I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
we are at a turning point in a certain sense because there
But
has
it's
been
even accelerating like crazy.
exactly,
It's like
exactly.
crazy. Like
And I
from
think
one year to another is like 10 years. It feels like 10 years. Like,
absolutely. I think if you look in any human development kind of graph, right, there
yeah.
has been constant progress, which is very good news, right, for humanity. But I think at the moment we are really hitting a new, let's say, dimension or a new scale of acceleration and of speed. And as you said, right, if
Yeah.
you look back 5 years ago, it was completely unheard of to have ChatGPT and the likes
Yeah.
fully ingrained in our daily operations. And if I take that as a frame of reference, I don't want to even think about how the world will only look like in 5 years, not even speaking about 25. But
Yeah.
once and again, I think if we speak about like the more industrial and energy or deep tech side of things, this is kind of the enabling force or the enabling kind of layers in the back end. So I
Yeah.
think also there we will see still a lot of innovation and still a lot of progress happening in the years to come.
Yeah, yeah, and also you didn't touch space, but I also want to mention space, like
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right.
launching stuff there in space, like through Starship. We aim to very go at very low cost for kilograms, and like space economy is going to be, I believe, huge in the next years. So
Yeah.
that's crazy. And I mean, and we all need a lot of energy. I mean, to make all this happen, we need a lot of energy. So we are trying to figure out ways to to make energy abundance, right? Abundant. And we mentioned there are different techs and different ways that can generate this abundance from fusion, nuclear. Now even Trump is coming back on the nuclear side, like pushing and putting money into nuclear project in America, even without a complete awareness of the type of climate consequences that this can generate. And also geothermal. So there are
Mhm.
different approaches. We look into space to Earth power beaming.
Uh-huh.
That we believe is a bit too early. What is your take on that? What is the most promising tech that you believe can really help Europe to be one of the
Mm,
key leaders in energy. I mean, I believe the majority of money went into fusion, for sure, with
hmm
Proxima Fusion, with Marvel Fusion, and with different projects. But yeah, I would love your perspective because you are into energy and you know for sure more than me.
Well, and I think the big question is how will an energy abundance mix look like by
Yeah,
2050? And I think once and again, if I look a little bit into history, there's always been a mix of energy sources or fuels historically that
yeah,
have quote unquote fueled the world or that energized the world. So I
yeah,
think what one term I sometimes use is this is going to be some sort of a team sport going forward,
yeah,
and different energy sources might play different roles. And we might have highly dispatchable baseload energy forms, as we have gas at the moment still. And we
mhm,
might have other baseload sources coming into the future, and I'll come to that in a second. But we also have like intermittent kind of additions to that, be that wind, be that solar. I think wherever we're gonna have it, we will have hydro. So we will, without any doubt and without any further development, we will have a big mix or a big kind of combination
yeah,
of suitable energy forms,
yeah,
aided by batteries, because once and again, that's probably the one asterisk that makes a lot of like the otherwise non-dispatchable loads somewhat usable as a baseload energy source or somewhat usable also in the infamous Dunkelflaute. So I
yeah,
think that's to me a bit of the basis. I
mhm,
think then on top of it, you can ask kind of 10 people that are in energy, and you will get 11 different responses whether
yeah.
geothermal, fission, or
But
fusion will
who
will
is
make it.
right?
Who's well, who's right will have had the chance to work with the entrepreneurs that have probably shaped our generation or will shape
Yeah,
our generation, and probably made also a lot, or will make a lot of money. I think I can speak for us. I think we as Leitmotif, we are quite long when it comes to fusion, because we
yeah,
do see this is a technology that has massive breakout potential, that
yeah,
has a lot of like the benefits of, if you wave a magic wand, how you would imagine an energy form to be. You
mhm,
have very little input requirements, which kind of cuts you loose of a lot of the restrictions of other energy forms,
yeah,
particularly in Europe. And I think there has been a lot of dependencies in the future.
mhm,
And that's one where there is at least a good chance for Europe, and also,
yeah,
frankly, for other regions to develop that independent energy source that can be locally produced.
yeah,
It is, I don't want to call it modular, but it's still somewhat modular, depending on which technology pathway in fusion
yeah,
will kind of cut through. It is also a technology where a lot of like additional offspringing micro technologies might stem from. There
mhm,
are kind of even companies looking into healthcare application, because you kind of get specific isotopes out of a fusion reactor.
yeah,
You might look into, if you believe in the laser-based fusion approach, lasers can be used for all sorts of other applications as well, and
yeah,
also magnets. If you believe in the magnet-based fusion approaches, there are
mhm,
also probably additional aspects or additional applications for that. So I
yeah,
think that is also in place. And I think then probably the last bit is you kind of find quite a bit of new common ground, I would call it. In the
mhm,
pre-discussion, we touched on that certainly Germany and other parts of Europe have had their history with nuclear, and I
yeah,
think
that's true. Yeah,
on the fission side very explicitly, and I think
yeah,
Germany made the very conscious decision to wind down all fission, while, for example, France is still seeing that and having that as an
yeah,
energy backbone. Without getting political, I think that was a decision that certainly limited Germany's abilities to
yeah, to do
navigate the
nuclear
last couple of
stuff.
years.
Yeah,
Exactly. So my big hope for fusion is, and I think there are big strides in that direction, that this is seen differently, because it's, in my belief, also structurally very different
yeah,
from what fission historically has been when it comes to a security and safety aspect. Again, also from a dependency aspect, I think all discussions around small nuclear reactors is still with a small question mark, at least, of where or which new dependencies you build up if you still have to rely on the respective feedstock. Having said all of that, I think we are quite long on fusion, being also aware still, obviously, that this is something where we only towards the 2040 mark probably see full commercialization
Okay.
of reactors. However, once and again, if the timeline is 2050 and if the goal is to become energy abundant by 2050, we
Yeah.
believe it's very much worthwhile to think about what can we do now,
Yeah.
because let's say the best time to kind of start a company was probably yesterday and the second
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
is today. So you probably have to also, if it's still a long development cycle, you have to, on such more groundbreaking technologies, you have to start somewhat early. So again, we kind of cheer on the entire ecosystem, but obviously with our exposure, for example, into Proxima, we are kind of putting a bit of our investment amount or investment money where our mouth is, in the
Yeah.
sense of believing that Europe has the chance to build a fusion hub or build fusion as one of the core deep tech technologies
Yeah.
that can be built here. Also, if you compare and contrast it to otherwise the US and China probably being
Mhm.
at the driving front of innovation.
Yeah, and like for this type of project, like fusion, etc., we mentioned the schedule is pretty long. So what is making them like a VC case, you know? Because you usually want to return the fund potentially within a certain period of time. What is the vision with this type of investment for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I think you have to take the perspective when and at what point in the life cycle of a company is what, let's say, asset class the right for it. And I think without any doubt, historically there has been the need to have, let's say, public funding to flow into more lab or more experimental spaces. I
Yeah.
think at some point, and I think that's not only for fusion, that kind of counts for many, let's say, more groundbreaking technologies, where some of the base work, when it's too early even for risk capital to flow in, where
Hmm.
a lot of that work is kind of hosted in universities or research centers. And again, for example, Helmholtz or Fraunhofer would be great kind of destinations for that in Germany. And at some point, and that's frankly also how, for example, Proxima started, there
Yeah.
is probably the right point in time where kind of early venture capital is willing to take a leap on a promising, let's say, lab proven technology or theoretically proven technology to be then scaled out. And where
Hmm.
there is certainly a period between this and the first kind of commercial demonstration where probably venture capital is a good source of capital to tap in. Because,
Yeah.
yes, high cost of capital, but also kind of we're willing to underwrite a great team with promising technology in a massive market. And I
Yeah.
think if you put these three things together, we ultimately land in anything that would work towards energy abundance, which I mentioned earlier, because energy is a massive market. It folds into so many things. It's the fuel not only for AI, but also for our continuously
For
electrifying
everything,
world.
I would say.
Exactly. Like we can drift into the discussion that I sometimes say the marginal cost of pretty much doing everything will converge towards the marginal cost of energy, not only the marginal cost of compute, but it's
Yeah.
probably another conversation. Back to what I said or what you asked, there is certainly a window where VC is the kind of best source of capital,
Hmm.
potentially also aided by kind of, again, government support programs to just kind of leverage that up and kind of
Yeah.
being able to, with that, establish, for example, fusion in Europe or in Germany or in parts of Germany. Having said all of that, there's also then probably a period coming where probably not yet project finance, but probably even like public markets find appetite for fusion.
Yeah.
We will see that a little bit with what is happening in the US at the moment, where
Yeah.
two fusion companies are now or have hit or will hit the financial markets or the public markets with TAE having
Hmm.
this intertwined merger with Trump Media Organization, and there's a whole backstory to that probably, but also like a Canadian-based fusion company going public through a SPAC merger. So I think all of that will kind of test the appetite for the public markets, because certainly there are public investors and probably also the public potentially being interested in such a category. So I
Yeah.
think all of that is showcasing that there is certainly a window also to leverage public markets and or more strategic partnerships to
Yeah.
also make this an absolute viable case for VCs. Because I think
Hmm.
no doubt that on the return potential, There is certainly a VC case to be made. I
Yeah.
think on the liquidity of these assets, I kind of look towards a period towards the let's say, late 2020s and the early 2030s, where there will be a lot of either commercial demonstration working out or not working out. And
Hmm.
if they work out, there is certainly a market for these companies. Well, if they don't work out, which I don't personally hope, then we might think differently. But I think there is at minimum a handful of companies that we will see trading public probably in the early 2030s. And this
Yeah.
is not kind of public market investing advice, but I do believe that quite a few will make a check mark behind their next commercialization steps or their next technical roadmap steps, which might
Yeah.
allow them to also tap into these pockets of capital. So
Yeah.
very lengthy answer to that, but that's a little bit the perspective why we believe it is still probably worthwhile investing in there, just given the sheer size of the opportunity, and
Yeah. Yeah.
frankly also a couple of the breakthroughs that have happened recently within these still research facilities, but also within the companies that are off to the fast horse race, I would call it, on a global scale.
Yeah. Do you have any feedback on like the geothermal sector, like as a source of energy? Like I saw like last week there like Hades mining did
Mhm.
like 50 million seed with yeah, they are like more on the mining side, so rare earth minerals, but their drilling technology may be used for geothermal purposes. And there are also a couple of other that are coming up and popping up. I don't know
Yeah.
if you have any feedback on that sector, or you didn't dig deeper enough on that
Yeah.
side yet.
Probably two remarks there. I think the first one on Hades is a good example for like looking below the earth or below our feet probably
Yeah,
makes a ton of sense for two reasons. One is energy, the other one is materials.
yeah,
And I think we can fill a whole podcast around that materials and especially rare earth minerals and
yeah,
probably also some others really feeding into that whole narrative of industrial resilience or also energy resilience, which again brings this whole aspect of how do we, for example, as Europe, want to build some sort of independence when it comes to building what we are about to build, because for all of that we yes need energy, but we also need materials. That's probably the second most basic building block. And I
hmm,
think for that, my understanding of Hades outside in is that they go in both directions, looking for geothermal applications, but also for
yeah, for
the
mining.
kind of
Yeah.
mining and minerals applications, which is a very interesting sector in
Yeah,
its
it's
own right.
definitely super relevant. Like it's
Yeah.
definitely super relevant.
It's
We need so much of like rare earth minerals because the majority is like refined in China, etc. So we want to have more domestic refinement, etc. So there's all a thesis on that side for sure.
Exactly. And once again, we can probably fill an entire podcast on what the
Yeah,
right
yeah,
business model is in that end. I'll leave that to another time. The geothermal side, I think I'll openly admit that I'm less deep in geothermal as, for
sure.
example, in fusion. But once and again, I think we as Europe, if I think about it that way, should have once and again probably several horses in the race. What I mean
Hmm.
by that is I come back to my argument on this is most likely going to be some sort of team sports. And
Yeah.
some locations, some geological constellations might favor geothermal at very cheap cost. Look
Hmm.
what is happening to some extent in some areas of, or like probably all areas of Iceland. It's probably like the prime example why this is technology that can kind of feed an entire nation if kind of you have very favorable circumstances. And I believe you can push that boundary of what is a favorable circumstance for geothermal quite a bit. So
Yeah.
I do think that there is quite a bit of potential still to be levered. I will again openly admit that I'll not be the absolute master expert in that sector.
We can dig deeper into that. We can dig deeper and
Dig
see.
deeper in the very kind of literal sense of the
Yeah.
word. But again, I think I do see very high level speaking. I do see also geothermal as yet another kind of technology that might have its right and that might have a color on that stack of 100% of energy is coming from X, Y, and Z.
Hmm.
And hopefully, one of these colors is represented by fusion.
Yeah.
A significant share will be covered by, let's say, classical renewables, wind, solar,
Yeah.
kind of hydro, in combination with batteries. I
Yeah.
also see geothermal, again, particularly in several locations, playing a significant role in that.
Yeah.
Full stop.
And do you see like renewable energy like scaling up? Because sometimes like the problem of renewable energy is like you cannot produce an unlimited amount, or there are constraints. Like do you see like in the future potential new solutions that can make this source more relevant, like for ab
Mm.
abundance of energy?
Yeah. So I think on the one hand side, there is certainly the idea of co-locating batteries with solar installations,
Yeah.
and I had an interesting conversation with a company that does robotics assembly of solar farms in the US.
Okay.
And I think by now, you don't build, and this goes for the US, this probably also goes for Europe or other
Yeah.
locations, certainly also for China. You don't kind of build a large kind of multi-hundred megawatt scale solar farm
Yeah.
without having attached massive battery blocks to that. So massive, in this case, lithium ion grid scale battery storage assets,
Yeah.
because that combination certainly helps you to get around some of the kind of volatility disadvantages of solar and also
Yeah.
for wind. There are, and that's the other bit, there are probably then several pathways to think about what could be breakthroughs that allow you to leverage these basic energy sources that are well understood, well down the cost curve. And I
Hmm.
think the aspects or the technologies I could think of is and further running down the cost curve of, let's say, classical battery storage. You
Yeah.
could think about LDES, so long duration energy storage solutions. So anything
Hmm.
that either mechanically or chemically or thermodynamically saves or is able to contain energy for a longer period of time,
Yeah.
which would also probably allow to store from one day to another, or at least longer than we currently do with lithium ion grid scale storage assets. And I think once again, if you zoom out once more, also several applications that might involve space-based solar power or at least wireless power transmission technology
Hmm.
might also be able to unlock some parts of that.
Yeah.
So once and again, I do see renewables play a very signal, like classical renewables, quote unquote, a
Yeah.
massive role in our further, especially short and mid-term shift in our energy system just
Hmm.
from a cost argument. And once
Yeah.
again, there might be a time when geothermal or nuclear fusion is super cheap and readily available
Yeah.
that they kind of consume up a little bit of their share. But I do
Hmm.
believe at the moment, there is, if you also look into the deployment curves, there is the rollout of renewables running at high speed, just given once and again the cost curve degradation being so high speed at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, that sounds great. And so let's go in the future. So let's suppose we are in 2050, we have infinite energy, like a abundance of energy. Do you see like constraints like in the current infrastructure, like complexities, even for example, to transmit all this energy, like which other components of the future infrastructure, for example, of cities, do you see that need like upgrade and improvement to even, for example, transmitting and use this whole energy? Do you have any take on that or?
Yeah. So I think you're touching on one aspect that I sometimes also put my finger towards, and that's that I believe that transmission and distribution, so all things physical grid, is a way underappreciated topic in the whole energy ecosystem.
Yeah.
And why is that? Because it's certainly, forgive me to be very blunt, it's less sexy than building fusion reactors or
Yeah, yeah,
doing
obviously.
geothermal drilling and so on. So I think transmission and distribution, or putting it differently, what do we do with abundant energy if there's no way to send it around the
Yeah,
world?
true, right.
So,
So,
so I believe that is probably one of the big hurdles that will let me put it in a very positive spin, that will remain our breed of investors and a lot of entrepreneurs busy because it's a
yeah,
big problem or a big opportunity to be resolved. And
yeah,
why is that? Because that system has to undergo at least as much change as the generation side.
yeah,
Because all of a sudden, we are not powering a grid that was built for, you have a couple of big nuclear plants and probably lignite plants and gas plants, and
yeah,
you push the energy very monodimensionally into the large load centers. That was kind of the, let's say, classical way how the grid was set up. And sometimes it's cited as the biggest machine that humanity has ever built. That's probably right, but you now have to kind of completely revamp that machine while it is expected to run at 99.99999, whatever the percentage point is, of reliability. And as long as we don't want to look into a future of continuous rolling blackouts, we
Yeah.
still want to have that system running very, very efficiently and effectively. However, we have to remodel it because we all of a sudden have a much more decentralized setup, right? We talked about it. We have not yet touched even the whole demand side and how that is changing.
Mm.
Data centers are new heavy clusters of energy consumption that have been almost unheard of. This was probably like massive industrial parks that
Yeah.
were, though not built, like over a short period of time only. So I think that is combined with the continuous electrification, which makes also our homes significantly higher consumers of electrical energy. So I
Yeah.
think all of these aspects combined with all sorts of new, let's say, setups, be that co-location or island mode or prosumers, just to kind of call out a few, all of that has made the system significantly, let's say, overexposed to all that change.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm saying that is because we, in many cases, have old hardware, old or non-existing software, and limited data and visibility. And I
Hmm.
think around that, there is a whole realm of businesses to be built. And that has, again, a whole continuum of let's leverage at least the data that we have or add new data to have oversight and insight at first, to at
Yeah.
least know what is going on. Second bit would be real-time steering, be that on the flexibility side, being able with that to manage and balance the grid much more, to kind of doing real-term predictive analysis on the grid to
Hmm.
prevent outages from happening, going towards upgrading the hardware or upgrading the hardware on a rolling basis,
Yeah.
to the whole aspect of, I touched on it already, but is there anything to be done on fundamentally transforming how transmission is done? And
Hmm.
that could be kind of new superconductive materials that could go into the direction of wireless power transmissions, at least for some aspects of it. And there might be more coming. So I think the whole aspect of grid as, let's say, the enabling technology
Yeah.
is something that that I do see also as quite an interesting sector. Having
Yeah.
said that, this is critical infrastructure, so it's actually quite tough to break into that. And like typically, I would say grid operators are not the ones that open the door first for startups and new companies to come in. But I
Yeah.
do see from more and more conversations in that sector, I see more appetite for change also there because we
Yeah.
are undergoing massive change in
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I believe you should go like in parallel, like
Yes.
and not like being at a point where you have all this energy and you don't know how
Mhm.
to manage it, right? So
Yes. Yes. Yes.
yeah, that's cool. And looking at the deep tech overall, like including different sectors that we mentioned, where do you think that capital is flowing like irrationally, like where there's hype, but in your opinion, there's not enough substance to represent a ready VC case? Do you have any take on that? Like
Mhm.
VCs are like misleading completely, or is it too early for something? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, who am I to judge a lot of that because we might only see by 2050. So therefore, I think obviously if you zoom out and you look where kind of stacks of capital are flowing,
yeah,
if you are in the bubble of energy, you still believe there's a lot of stuff going on. Like if
hmm,
you zoom out, there is so much at the moment flowing in all sorts of different Gen AI applications. And I
yeah,
think I'll be questioning some of the defensibility of these compared
I agree,
to
I
the
agree.
defensibility of building like the underlying system behind that. So I
Hmm.
think I would jokingly say if you are long Gen AI, you have to be long energy and infrastructure and industrials
Yeah,
because otherwise it will be tough to get this on the road ultimately. And I
hmm,
think the other bit is also, and that's something where also probably we in the broader energy sector need to, let's say, pace ourselves and look at the fundamentals. Yes, Gen AI or like the arrival of AI superclusters are certainly boosting electricity consumption, are certainly at the moment a significant catalyst to changes and also to a lot of capital flowing into these sectors on the
Yeah.
technology side. Still, I think there's a balance to be struck between AI also being able to optimize ultimately how much energy, for example, is consumed. So I think I would advise everyone to not kind of overshoot on the expectations. Having said
Mhm.
all of that, I think we are in a period at the moment where we are in this classical dilemma of innovation typically happening in an S curve, and at the beginning you underestimate the impact, and at the later end at the beginning you overestimate the impact, and then you underestimate the impact. So I think we are in that period at the moment, which again calls for a bit more nuance on a few things, and that's probably the thing I want to say. VC and investing is always probably driven a little bit by cycles and by things being a bit more hyped and a little bit less hyped. But I
Yeah.
think it is probably worthwhile to take that more broad perspective of what will probably sustain over the longer period. And I
Yeah.
think I don't want to say that Gen AI is not here to stay. It's absolutely here to stay. I'm
Yeah.
just saying then also the underlying factors or the underlying industries that enable it are here to
Yeah,
stay.
like focusing on fundamental stuff
Exactly.
that are critical. Yeah, I agree with your view. And on like if we look into the future, like 2030, 2040, 2050, how do you see like Europe in the global ecosystem with the US, China? Like, do you see a similar scenario to the current one that we are living? Do you see like Europe ahead in some sectors compared to US or China, for example, I don't know, quantum computing or like energy, some energy components? How do you see the future for Europe?
Yeah. So let me put it that way. I hope that in 2050 we have a role to play in this kind of
Hopefully,
growth.
hopefully.
Exactly, and that if I hope for that, I say we have to act like the day before yesterday, right?
Yeah,
So I think without any doubt there is significant lack in many kind of fundamental technologies in Europe
yeah,
or commercialization of fundamental technologies. What makes me a little bit sad is that there is a lot of potential, right? I think there are so many statistics out there that cite that Europe has great universities, great people, actually
yeah.
great basic infrastructure to do a lot of like groundbreaking innovation, but
Hmm.
is so far not fully able to get this on the road. Once and again, I think one of our fundamental investment beliefs as frankly or officially a US fund, and we have that discussion all the time, like where do we want to allocate that money? And I think
Yeah, because you see a solution in both markets, right?
exactly. And there are probably enough, frankly, and I kind of wave towards our friends on the US side that say we only want to invest in the US and we don't believe that Europe is making the cut. I think
Yeah,
we are, and it's my very personal belief, we are thinking differently about that and believe Europe has a right to play if great entrepreneurs are kind of starting to tackle big markets and kind of the quote unquote the public or politics are allowing for that to happen. And
yeah,
I think I don't want to like overemphasize that example of fusion, but I think that's one, at least on the early strides, where you could say that Europe, or particularly Germany, has made developments in the right direction. Quantum could be another one where, again, there is a good basis probably in Europe.
yeah,
And maybe there is not only the political willingness, but also the talent that is able to lift such an industry off the ground.
yeah,
Also, in that kind of two hegemon dominated world of China and the US otherwise making the race. And again,
yeah.
that might be the case in quantum. That is certainly the case in fusion, where at the moment these two kind of spheres are certainly the dominant ones. But I
Hmm.
see no reason not to take a shot at that at the moment. I
Yeah,
think I'm saying that because in 10 years it's going to be too late. And I
yeah.
think it's a little
Maybe today is a bit too late. I don't wanna.
so and then you can ask the question if we believe that for a second, then we still shouldn't stop because if we then stop now, we can wave the white flag
Yeah, we
and
are.
and
Yeah,
and that's why I'm saying there is as for better or for worse, resilience is becoming more of a word that is put forward, and I
yeah,
believe there is a value in building some level of resilience, and I do see once and again one of the strengths that are still present in Europe is an industrial ecosystem because
hmm,
that's what kind of Europe has been, and also again Germany has been famously building a lot of their wealth
yeah,
on. I do believe that if now upgrades to that system are made at a significant pace, I still am very hopeful for Europe, and I'm
yeah,
saying
yeah,
that as
yeah.
a proud European. And that's sad, or that's sad. I do believe, and I do actively allocate capital here, or we do actively allocate capital here, and not only
Yeah.
in the US,
Yeah.
because we believe there is a lot of potential still to build at least Europe
Solutions. Yeah. Yeah.
category defining companies. Probably some of them even being able to also go to the US. We started with Robco. Again, they are also active on the other side of the Atlantic, and I hope a lot of our European portfolio companies will at some point have the potential to either
Yeah.
serve entire Europe and or kind of also serve other markets because
Yeah.
they have built such superior technology that they can actually go out and start to export that again and
Yeah.
export
Yeah.
innovation instead of us just importing innovation.
Yeah.
And
That's
this is
true. That's
now
true.
a
That's true.
big player for Europe standing up, but I think I'm saying that just to also counter a lot of the pessimism that has been kind of floating in. And I
Yeah.
would be the last one to kind of close my eyes in front of reality, saying we are certainly behind, but that's
Yeah.
not a reason to like stop here. It's probably even more a reason to at
To
least
accelerate
selectively start
and
moving. Exactly.
yeah. Yeah, and so you believe that like politics should change like policy like to what is like stopping Europe from building more companies and startups, successful startup? Is it policy and the difficulty to create companies here in Europe and so the easiness to open more companies in US? Do you have any take on that?
So I think it's a combination of many things, right? It's probably like some call it regulatory or bureaucratic hurdles.
Yeah,
Yes, can tackle that. I think it's also capital, and especially like on the even later than when we could or would come in,
yeah,
the ability to kind of raise $1 billion in Europe is certainly not at the same level as raising $1 billion in a kind of competitive environment in the US. So I think but that's something that only kind of starts to exist if ecosystems are taking more shape. And I
yeah.
think once and again, beforehand, we spoke about Zurich kind of making good strides in the right direction of, breeding an ecosystem. I think London has bred out an ecosystem of not so much on the deep tech side, but at least of companies that are like in this first generation of like significant decacorn companies that have
Yeah,
global reach, based and built out of Europe. Munich has its right to play in that whole equation, particularly on the industrial side. So I
yeah,
think it's probably the third aspect beyond policy, capital. It's the ecosystems, and with that, the density of talent kind of
yeah,
running
yeah,
after it,
yeah,
because we have kind of that underlying, let's say, basic technology or basic knowledge being kind of or coming out of universities. And it's probably the last bit. As ecosystems mature, also universities and kind of such public institutions become ever better in kind of churning out these technologies into a commercial roadmap. And I think that's a learning journey. The problem
yeah,
is a little bit we now have to learn that a bit on the spot. And I'm certainly aware that there are lots of things that have to come together, but it's a combination of these and probably other things that I just touched upon that would be able to propel Germany or Europe a bit more forward.
yeah.
And once again, I'm saying if we were to lack the basis, it would probably be a lost cause, but we don't lack the basis. We have a good basis,
No, we
and we
have
are on.
technical people and talent. We have that for sure.
Yeah.
So
And I think the last bit is, and that's a bit our fund model. We want to kind of bridge innovation also like across the Atlantic. And I think it fills me with pride that also like US portfolio companies of ours are looking into Europe and looking to kind of bring technology and talent, and with that kind of places for people to work at into
yeah,
Europe to kind of deploy technology here because they believe they have an interesting industrial partnership network to tap into, because they believe they have a good kind of ecosystem to tap into, a good talent base to tap into. So I
yeah,
think we should certainly be realistic about what is possible at the moment, what has to be changed. But I
yeah.
think once again, I'm not a fan of declaring the European kind of ecosystem or continent for bankrupt in the
Uh,
technology sense. I think that would be not only way too early, but also would throw away so much good potential, which once
no,
and
no,
again,
I agree with you. I agree with you. All right, yeah. Let's push Europe to do great. I don't know. I mean, but yeah, we'll see in the future. And so when you have to decide since you invest both in US and Europe, when you have to decide like to invest or in an ecosystem or in another, for example, in energy. So you see both. in US and Europe? Is there like a criteria that you follow specifically to say, hey, let's go for US, or hey, instead let's go for Europe, or is more about the one that really pick you up and say we this founder and this team is amazing
Mhm.
regardless of what we need to invest in these people. Is
Yeah.
there like a criteria or path, mental path that you follow on that side?
So it's probably two sides to that question. So I think on the one hand, it is always like, and you know that well enough, right? There's always a specific combination of technology, people, and probably also the timing. And with timing, I would also include probably the geographical component into it. So I
Yeah.
think I would not necessarily say that we would go for a C team just because it's in the US versus an A team just because it's in Europe. So that's certainly not the case. It's
Hmm.
always the kind of full circle. What I also try to say is in so probably very basic principle. I do believe that it's probably also a European thing. If you put decarbonization first, it's probably and kind of throw away the like financial return or like
Yeah.
the business case for that, it's going to be a tough sell. Markets will stay at dwarf scale. However, I'm firmly believing, and we had a longer discussion about renewables, that
Yeah.
decarbonization is a logical consequence of many commercially viable or commercially minded decisions. Once again, there is a reason why solar and wind is seeing a lot of deployment just because it's on a marginal cost side or on a levelized cost of energy side in many, many places the by far cheapest energy technology. Yes, it comes with some downsides, but it is a commercially viable and an economically valid decision to go with that. And decarbonization is great. It's the kind of knock-off effect of that. So
Hmm.
I think what I try to say with that is that sometimes it's underappreciated how different business cases might look like in the US versus or in North America versus Europe. I make one stupid example. If you think about energy, the kind of marginal unit or the marginal fuel is oftentimes gas.
Hmm.
And US looks into significantly cheaper gas supply because they have a lot of shale gas themselves. Like for Europe, looking into gas is looking into oftentimes foreign imports, either from Russia and or from the US or from
Yeah.
like other regions at significantly higher cost points. So some technologies might just see significantly earlier break-even territory than
Yeah.
there is in the US. So what I try to say with that, there could be an A team with a technology in the US serving though a very hard, much harder to tap into market, particularly in energy,
Hmm.
versus the same setup in Europe, where I'd say you're much more quickly in the money with
Yeah.
your, let's say, option to build that technology in a certain energy vertical. So
Yeah.
very long story short, it's a bit of a nonsense answer to say it very much depends, but it in fact very much depends on the
Very
on the
much.
on the
Yeah.
respective
Case by
setup.
case. All
Exactly.
right.
And once again, I'm kind of holding up, or we are holding up the flag for Europe and also our internal investment decisions. But I think there is, if you look into deal flow opportunities, there is a lot of interesting stuff to be done in Europe, and I think I'll hold ourselves and myself also a little bit accountable to that.
Yeah.
That there is still a lot of investment to be made here.
Awesome. Toward the end of our chat, any contrarian thought that you have as a venture capitalist, like for example, a belief that is usually spread across people that you don't agree or vice versa, like
Mhm.
anything contrarian thought that
So maybe already quite a bit of what I said might be might be contrarian for one or the other. I think probably just adding on a couple of things that I discussed. So I think or that we discussed. I think the one is we spoke about the grid, right? I
yeah,
think a lot of big consumers believe they can flee into island mode and the world is happy
yeah,
and it will all be great. I don't believe that this will work out. I think we will ultimately be somewhat connected through the grid. And I think with that, we need to fix the grid, which is an exercise that many people are kind of pushing away and saying, yeah, we kind of just do a lot of gas turbines or batteries on site and do basically co-location with consumption, and then everything is good.
yeah.
If you want to reach kind of very high uptimes, you will ultimately fall into the backup. And we have a big problem there that we have to rely on that backbone. But I do
Mhm.
believe there is quite a bit of a total energy system to be looked into. Having
Okay.
said all of that, as you know, I did a lot of like battery investing in my Picos times, and I think spoke to many people that say, well, the only way is kind of grid scale batteries because they are certainly from a cost benefit perspective probably at the best intersection.
Hmm.
However, I also believe that we need a lot of like decentralized steerable load, and batteries are just the best way to get there.
Yeah.
So I think that makes me, I'm not sure this is a very contrarian belief, but it
Yeah. Yeah.
makes me a big fan of thinking about also like the tail ends of our network. And
Hmm.
with that, I mean the often cited street in which a lot of Teslas might charge at the same time in an affluent neighborhood because they all come back home at 18 o'clock. So I think a lot of that is forming my fundamental belief that the grid is probably the most interesting one to look into going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think also there, I think we see sometimes the art of strong opinions loosely held. I think there are probably contrarian views that I might have today that change tomorrow, or beliefs where I feel I'm on the I'm on the generalist and mainstream side, and I have to change them tomorrow because there's new data coming in. So I wanna rather close with it is very interesting times to be kind of exposed with great founders, and I think you share that. What makes our job so fun is kind of working with probably the most exceptional and most driven people in the world, working on
Yeah.
super hard and super rewarding problems, and kind of as a venture capitalist, you can be in the middle, forming your own beliefs and your own opinion of
Yeah.
what you find interesting. And I think therefore it's probably yes, I might have a few contrarian beliefs, but I even more so enjoy the conversation with folks that have very contrarian beliefs that I have
Yeah.
never thought about. And
Yeah.
then
Being
we
like open-minded and see, and
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Awesome. On that note, yeah, let's close this episode. Thanks a lot, Philip. I really appreciate this
Thanks for
combo.
having me.
You're a great guy and very smart person. Thanks a lot for watching, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye bye.